Welcome to episode 47 of the Tax Professionals podcast. In this episode, Dipti Thakrar shares with us an invaluable insight into in-house tax roles after many years of working in-house herself.
Welcome to the Tax Professionals podcast, the podcast dedicated to helping you improve your tax career. Here's your host, Jack Bonehill.
Is the only difference to an in-house tax role to working in an accountancy firm the fact that you don't have to do timesheets? It seems to be the go-to answer when talking about pros of working in-house, but surely there's more to it than that. I was curious, so I spoke to Dipti Thakrar to get an insider's perspective. Dipti worked for KPMG before having her first in-house tax role in 2003, and since then has had many in-house roles, along with 6 years at BPP. For Dipti, working in-house is what she prefers, and her knowledge of working in-house is second to none. She clearly has a strong understanding of the tax industry more generally, as she also tutors, is vice chair of the London branch for Women in Tax, is chair for the East Midlands CIOT branch, and she's also chair for a forum of in-house transfer pricing practitioners. During our conversation, Dipti shares with us why she likes working in-house. She shares the differences to working in-house compared to working for an accountancy firm. She compares the salary differences, including times to move in-house where you'd get a salary increase, a work-life balance comparison, and she shares her advice on how to obtain an in-house role suitable for you regardless of your specialism. You can get rough timings for where we discuss each of these points in the details section of the episode in your podcast player, or by heading on over to taxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPP47. Make sure you don't miss out on any future episodes of the podcast by subscribing or signing up for email notifications at taxprofessionalspodcast.com/subscribe. The email notifications will give you a brief summary of each episode so that you can decide if you want to listen. Episodes are bi-weekly and are released on Mondays. Just before we get into the episode, I'd like to mention this. When I graduated, my first job choice was to be an actuary, with working in tax as a close second. And even though I've enjoyed all my tax roles, it wasn't until I became CTA qualified that I decided tax was where I wanted to stay. With tax, there's so many different roles and places to work. They all provide something a bit different, and while that's great, it's meant I've spent a lot of time thinking about what areas of tax I want to work in and where I want to take my career long term. I've been caught up in my own thoughts. I've had doubts. I've been unsure. What's been most useful for me is talking to others, saying what I'm thinking, having someone listen, and hearing their advice. The tax recruitment company understands this and can help you with a free career coaching chat with them. They have over 60 years experience in the sector. They can help you explore the options, they can help you decide what's best for you, and they can help you to create a plan to transform your tax career, making you feel more content and happier in your life. You can book a free, no obligation call with them by heading on over to thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/free career chat. That's thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/free career chat. Thanks to the tax recruitment company for sponsoring the podcast, which is helping me to continue creating episodes. Without further ado, let's get to the episode. Just to kick off then for today, Dipti, when people ask you what you do from a work perspective, how do you usually respond?
That's a great question. What do I do from a work perspective? Usually the question isn't work. Usually the question is, what do you do? And it's very rare someone puts a work in there, which allows me to talk about other things that I do, which are not work related. But when it comes to work, my job title is I look after taxes for 3 countries, UK, Ireland and Norway. Plus I lead the M&A practice team, slowly building it in-house and enjoying that in an industry environment. So that's what I do for a day job.
Yeah. So do you do some other things as well, like tutoring and any volunteer roles or anything like that?
Yes, I do. I think I personally come alive through meeting people and having a diverse set of just relationships and tasks. So prior to picking this job and becoming employed, I was contracting for a few years, and that also meant I had flexibility to do other things. So I'm a CPD tutor for an education establishment in London who I worked for 7 years ago, BPP. I also volunteer for not-for-profit organisations. I'm a governor at a school, which I've recently left. I owned a small business for 3 years and I closed it down during COVID. I have couple of other charities that I support. The not-for-profits that I'm a chair at the East Midlands CIOT. I run and support the Women in Tax as vice chair in London. I've done this for a couple of years, stepping down shortly. I chair the East Midlands Women in Tax. We've been a bit quiet during COVID, but hopefully things pick up again. And I run a transfer pricing group in London as well.
Yeah. So now I understand actually why you would usually answer the question, what do you do, with a lot more things than just your work, because you do loads of things outside of your day job, if you want to call it that, by the sounds of it. Yes,
I do. And I don't go looking for these opportunities. I think my life concept is the door's knocking, open it. And I open to see who my guests are in this metaphoric world, just to see, does it excite me? Do I come alive? Is it something I love? And if those 3 questions are ticked, I figure out how I put them into my life. And hence I have the same 24 hours you do, Jack, but I'm mindful that I fill mine up a lot more than my other colleagues and friends do.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're the type of person that thrives off just, I suppose, being busy and keeping yourself occupied with exciting and varied almost activities, if you want to call it that.
Yes, I do. And I think the pandemic has been a massive check-in for me, because there were a various amount of things I was doing where there was no passion, love and excitement. And I had an opportunity to go through my list, and because things were cancelled, that worked well. And I've taken my time to put things back in. And that's my choice, because everything that goes back in now, including this podcast, is because I want to do it. And it's definitely something I want in my life. And if it's not something I want, I don't make time for it.
Yeah, well, I feel very blessed then that you've that you wanted to come on the podcast. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. I think a lot of people actually do struggle with saying no to things, but it sounds like you've got that down to a T almost, to just get exactly what you want.
Yes, definitely. No, that's a good pick up there, Jackson. A no is a very powerful sentence. People forget that. It's got a capital letter and a full stop. And no explanation is required when you say no. And I live by that. So if I'm interested, I'm in. If I'm not, then I excuse myself, because it is a massive opportunity for somebody else. So why hog the seat and half-heartedly be there? So if your heart and soul is not in it, don't do it. Would be my top.
Yeah. I'm fully with you there. I think a lot of people are just scared to say no, or think they're going to upset people and stuff. But I think sometimes if you don't say no, actually you're doing more harm than you would if you just said it.
Yeah, so it's true. And it's a good thing to reflect on, because you're saying no, you think it impacts the other person a lot more than it actually does. But it gives you a big peace of mind that you make the right decision for yourself. So I use the word often, and I do think about it before I use it.
Yeah, I think it's a good philosophy anyway that you've got around the word no there. So just before you moved into your current role then to be, is it a head of tax role, isn't it, you're currently in?
We're not. See, this is fancy thing. This is we're dipping into the world of industry tax. Titles don't mean much in industry. Head of tax, country tax manager. It's just a title. And I think people who have practice backgrounds or advisory backgrounds are quite precious about job titles. Whereas in industry, the job is phenomenal. And I would always focus on the job description. Don't worry too much about the job title. So in your head, am I head of tax? Well, I am, but there's nobody above me or below me in my countries. But country tax manager suits me fine as well.
Got you. Okay. So before you took this role, and you said you were doing contracting then. So I suppose what made you want to go and work in-house as opposed to for an accountancy practice?
For me, when I made the decision, it was very close to my first set of qualifications, the ACA. I was a year and a couple of months after exams and my title. And it was the right time for me, for hundreds of reasons, to come into industry. And I never looked back, and I never went back. So many times I thought I would. I do fancy the title of being a tax partner, but then something else happened to me in industry. I just fell in love. I think it's, if you look at the chargeability, I'm probably 120% chargeable. The admin work we do is done alongside our chargeable work. It is a different part of the advisory work we do from practice to industry, because often when I'm writing a letter, I remember back when I write a letter and I'm an advisor, I've got 4 pages of caveats at the back, because this is legally what my firm has to do. And then I answer the question that I'm asked. and then I raise a fee. I don't know what happened if the question had changed. I don't know how they implemented. There's no evaluation. It's like there's no closure on that piece of work, because from an advisor perspective, that's it, I'm done. But when you come into industry, it's a whole new game. So you ask the question, but you then ask the question slightly differently, because you're trying to build a scenario of answers, and the actual decision the business makes will be off the back of my modeling and my various answers, my conclusions. I keep an eye on the tax law. I go back and ask, did you implement? How did it work? And it goes beyond one question, one answer. And that's why I thrive. I like that. I like that concept that I'm part of something which is longer. I get a chance to evaluate. I get a chance to fix things. I get a chance to support the business in a proactive way. And that's why I like industry.
So it sounds like one of the big reasons then that you like it is because almost you get to be closer to the advice you've given and seeing it from start to finish. Whereas, as you say, in practice, you will just give that piece of advice in a solo context and then, I suppose, never see what happens with it and not see like the end result almost.
And yes, that in a generalized way, yes. But a lot of advisors are very closer, or the go-to person for tax advice. So perhaps they do see more execution and more time to implement and support implementation, obviously for a fee. But the industry team, that's part of the job. And yes, you're right. You get to be closer to the team. If the team want you closer, that's another thing as well. Maybe they don't want to hear about tax or get interested in tax. So one of the things about being in the tax department in industry, you have to go around waving the flag, say, I'm in tax, guys, how can I help? Where do you need me? You do know I can help. And it's constantly supporting the team and saying, we're here to help. And that's fun too.
Yes, because I think one of the problems when you're an advisor sitting on the outside is people don't really want to speak to you about tax if they don't work in tax. And by the sounds of it, when you're in industry, that almost gives you the opportunity to go out there and say, I'm here, I can help you, let me help you type thing. And they're more willing to speak to you and work together.
Yes, and that's right, Jack. And also we must remember when we're in industry, life is a different pace. There's only one client at a time, albeit there could be 100 stakeholders. And you have a little bit, when you first start, you have luxury of time on your side to get to know the business, to arrange meetings, to say, well, what are you doing? It's not particularly a tax meeting. It's more about, well, what's the business doing? Are they buying? Are they selling? Are they closing down things? Are they tidying up? Are they doing restructuring? What is the business actually doing live right now? And that's when you think, okay, so what's the tax on this? And so it's, it's different, but for me, it's where I like to be in industry.
Yeah. So those are things that obviously that you've realised you've liked, I suppose, now you work in it. But did you have a different expectation when you first worked in-house, and kind of did any of those expectations marry up, or just like be completely well off the mark, if you can remember?
Oh, that's asking me to cast my mind back. Asking me, what do I think? I think one of the first revelations for me was I am now the client. I think that was by far my biggest whoa moment, because before I was advising the client, now I am the client. And every time I asked a question, I have to be mindful that I am the tax expert here. There is no one else I'm presenting to. So the people I am speaking to after I have finished my analysis are not tax people. So it's a very, very different way of speaking to stakeholders and explaining things to them. So for me, that was my biggest revelation when I actually hit industry. I'm the client.
Yeah. So obviously you've kind of said that you are the tax person in the business. So does that come with an amount of pressure, do you think, to like get it right and do a good job if you've got less people to bounce ideas off and to say, check your work and things like that? Massively.
Because I think when you're in practice, you have the support of your peers, you've got access to support as in new graduates coming in who are wanting to learn, so you can give them stuff, they can do your research for you, so it cuts time out of your life. You've got seniors above you who can coach you, guide you, you have access to technical repositories, and you have partners who are moving around looking at high-tech tax matters that you can run a call past. See, that diminishes a little in industry. It's a very small team. And if you've hired specialists in each area and there's not many generalists, then you can struggle bouncing ideas. And that's when your power of networking comes in, because if you have access to 4 or 5 of people like me who also run jobs like me, it's very simple. You would just call one of them and say, I'm stuck, how did you do this? And those calls happen quite often because there's a few of us working together to get to the same place. And that's the support network sometimes, through externally as well as internally.
Yeah, that feels very different actually to like in practice, because when you're in practice, you're almost in competition with other tax advisors, whereas I suppose that element's lost, isn't it, when you're working in-house? Because really, there's no competition between the tax people. You're just working on your business and sharing ideas almost. So
yes and no. So I think if someone is listening to this literally and thinks it's okay to go call your best friend in another department, it's not okay. Be mindful of your code and what is confidential, and be mindful of all those regulations that you sign up and all the meetings that you go to, because your businesses could be listed. So the kind of questions I've normally raised are quite generic, and it's like teasing something out the legislation, or it's quite vague. You're not able to work out what I'm doing based on the question I have asked. I'm very careful about that. So I would encourage people to network. It's very good for career. It's good for raising awareness of what the market's like in recruitment right now in industry. It raises your awareness of how to build yourself better with soft skills, because I think they get tested a lot in-house as well, and not necessarily just for technical reasons.
Yeah, so what would you say kind of the big difference in terms of where you need strong soft skills than working in-house as opposed to working in practice?
So in practice, most of your conversations internally are with people who are at the same level as you or on the same tax area as you. So you're speaking tax to tax people, and maybe you're only writing to a CFO or an FD or a financial controller. Not often. So often your message you have to deliver is very tax orientated. I think when you hit industry, not often are your conversations with tax people. You do speak to tax people, but the memos you write often have to be so a non-tax person can pick it up. So there's a huge amount of communication skills there to consider. Do you, or can you, so the way I would say it is, can you explain this to my parents? Can I explain what I do to my parents? If I can, then I know how to write that note. So that's usually a very simple litmus test there. So you're just trying to see, could you explain it in a way that you've got the message across, you've got the risks across, and really focus on your executive summary, because a lot of people don't go past it, especially if a tax person's written it. They just want to see, okay, what's the problem? Did you fix it? And if you didn't fix it, what's the problem? How is it going to hit my numbers? And that's all my stakeholders are looking for.
Mm-hmm. So it's much more kind of almost a commercial standpoint, really, I think, compared to working in practice, because I suppose you're getting asked the questions by all the people around the business, and they're not bothered about tax, as you say. They're just bothered about the end result of it. I think it's a good point to make.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I was just saying the other thing. What would the business want to do, as you can imagine, is to run the business. And they don't want tax coming in to say, right, can't do this, can't do this, can't do that. And I always start my conversations to say, I'm not here to stop you, I'm here to help you. The more you tell me, the easier you make my job. And that opens up a lot of interesting conversations. It's very much, you guys carry on as you are, just let me build it around you. And that works beautifully. That's when you've got them on the same side as you, they're open, they're talking to you, and they come to you proactively. Okay, that creates a lot of work, but it's the right way. Tax people like it. They want to be there before anything is signed. They want to be there when things are being discussed. And that's where tax people can add value. My colleagues can add a lot of value there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the issues sometimes, I think, when you work in practice, you can get kind of caught up in thinking that everything's about tax, whereas obviously in the business world, tax is just like a side consideration, really. So I think when you're working in-house, by the sounds of it, you really get to feel that more and get to appreciate and respect that more, because of the people that I suppose you're talking to are not tax people.
Yeah, and it's also a lot of finance people. Some of like my favorite CFOs are very high. They have very high-end tax skills as well, and they're quite dangerous CFOs, because they will start asking questions after listening to the budget or hearing listening to one of the advisors and say, right, have you thought about this? And you have to walk in and say, yeah, I've thought about it, nothing to worry about. So sometimes you are speaking to some very, very intelligent people who are tax aware. So they're not looking for the legislation to be explained. They just need to know, have you got their risks covered?
Kind of then in almost summary then, I mean, what would you say are like the key differences then to working in-house as opposed to working for an accountancy practice or an advisory firm?
Oh, lots and lots of differences. And we could probably group them into many different things. But job title, I mentioned earlier, people are a lot sensitive about a job title from practice. But in industry, I would say just relax. It's not your job title that is massively important in industry. I also think people in advisory firms can see a progression of a career, because you can see, right, perhaps 2 years at a manager level, I can then start to apply to be a senior manager, maybe a director, maybe a partner. So there's like a chronological order, maybe even set number of years, 3 to 5 years. It doesn't work like that in industry. You perhaps could end up moving departments, moving businesses. You could zigzag your way up. If you come in as a tax accountant, will you be head of tax one day? Oh, a lot of different things need to happen to engineer that for you. So that I would say title, career progression, obviously how that is set, the way you think about your work is slightly different. And is your work massively variable? Yes, it is, because if you do talk to people in industry, once they end up with a client, industry, big house name, hundreds of them, I can name them now, they don't move, because the work they're getting year on year, quarter on quarter keeps changing and it's kept alive. So I just find it massively interesting when someone is in industry, how reluctant they are to move, even an organisation, because they really do love where they are. I speak for all of them, but I'm sure they will come and tell you different if they do that.
Just a reminder that you can book a free career coaching chat with the Tax Recruitment Company by heading on over to thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/free career chat. The Tax Recruitment Company can help you decide what's best for you and your career.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think of kind of the pay compared to working in accountancy practice then? Are they kind of on the same level for similar seniority, if you want to call it that, or do you think there's a bit of a difference?
Pay's an interesting one, mighty sensitive, and it depends who you work for. So if I had to compare what I think practice perhaps underpays a little, depending on which company you're with. But if you're with one of the bigger ones, you are, I feel, overpaid, because when you try to switch into industry, it's very hard to get that salary matched unless you go to a very, very big client, big in-house tax team. So there are two sweet points when you can move from advisory to industry. Just personally, I feel it's probably a year or two after you've qualified, because your salary can be matched potentially, and maybe you'll get a little rise from practice to industry. And then the second time you can do it is when you're quite senior and you're jumping as head of tax. I think those are the two places where I think you can move and maintain salary or increase. Anywhere in the middle, it varies. It massively varies. Some industry jobs are very well paid and could be out of sync with an equivalent role if you had to try back and get into advisory, and vice versa, depending on how big the advisory firm is. But those two spots, I think they're a lot easier to move. Those would be the two times I would say you can move and not worry about a material change in your salary.
Yeah. So it sounds like really then it depends where you're in your career in terms of whether when you move to industry, you'd have a pay rise or a pay cut, which is actually an interesting one to think that it kind of almost changes dependent on the seniority. I mean, what do you think you get back then from, because let's say someone's considering moving from an accountancy practice to industry and they're going to have to take a pay cut to do it because they're not at that sweet spot. What other benefits do you think come with working in-house that could outweigh the pay cut?
For me personally, pay's never been a factor when I'm deciding my role. My boss is listening, or if he's not, hopefully it massively does an impact. It's something my father said very early on. Don't look at the money, look at what you're going to learn. And if you can keep learning, if every 6 months you've treated your CV like an evaluation, your own personal appraisal report, where you've added on new legislation, new ways of handling things, a better, softer skill, a bigger presentation, a bigger networking event, you've personally built your CV and you've made it better every 6 months. I wouldn't worry too much about the pay. It comes back to where you should be with the skill set you have. And that may sound to people, it's a bit wishy-washy. It's massively not. If you are, there's not a big pay cut. So I know you used that phrase earlier when people are switching outside of those two roles I mentioned, because individuals who are good at what they do will sell themselves well, and an industry would match it. So I haven't heard of many pay cuts, but a couple of my friends who did take a pay cut, within 12 to 18 months, their pay's gone back up again because they've proved it's worth it that they were hired. And that's whereas that pay rise would not have happened in practice, but it's easier to get in industry because you prove, well, look, you hired me as a manager, but the work I'm delivering is senior manager / director level for industry. Please, can I have a pay rise? And it works. I've supported a lot of those letters and applications and those conversations up to their stakeholders. I have been asked to support those, and all of them, most of them, have come back with pay rises.
Yeah, good. I think it is a good point actually about kind of thinking about the learning aspect of it, particularly.
It is.
I would say earlier on.
Money. Yeah, don't focus on the money. The money comes. So you're looking at a starting salary of when you're starting. But you really should pull a recruiter in here. I'm just going on based on my recruitment needs that I've done in the UK. So you're looking at about 15 to 25, subject to where you're hired. As you get your exams, you're looking at between 30 to 40, 45, and you're living in that range. To start getting it to 50 to 60, it's, I would say, another couple of years. The guys who are going 75 plus to 100, there's something different about them. Either they've put the mileage in or they've started adding skill set to their CV. And they're the ones who are getting close to six figures. Anyone who goes higher than that, then they've got, I would say, a lot of polished skills to get there.
Yeah.
And some people actually, Jack, can add another zero on the end of that. And that's quite superb. And yes, they do work in tax. They can do that.
So you think it is actually possible to earn over £1 million?
Yes, it is. It is. And that's why I said, don't focus on the money, focus on the learning, and when the opportunities come, you'll be able to see, can I do this? You'll look at the job description, you'll say, I can hit 80% of this description. Let me apply for the job. And you'll start seeing the growth come. So don't always focus on the money. Those are just rough bandings. Please speak to a recruiter if you want that confirmed. But from my research on the market, that's where I see the ranges.
Yeah, it's been an interesting insight anyway. I think particularly when you're earlier on in your career, you can get focused and bogged down too much on your salary. I think that's like the least time to worry about it, because you might get an extra grand here and there, but how much of a difference is an extra grand going to make to your life over the course of a year after tax?
I've had a couple of people who've worked for me, and halfway through our relationship, they would say, I've been offered a job that's 15k more, and it's quite tight for me to give them that 15k based on where they are now. And I said, well, if you stay with me, I can get you another 40k in 3 years. Entirely up to you, but you take that 15k now. That's where you'll be, because no one's going to teach you how to get 40k. I will. And it's a decision I leave with them entirely. And a few of them take the 15, a couple of them give me an opportunity to get them to that 40.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, just in terms of work-life balance, do you think it's better in industry or just comparable?
Oh, that's a great question. I think I've heard that question a couple of times from students who are just about to start work as well. I personally believe you make your own work-life balance. Some days my ethos is 8-8-8. There's 24 hours in the day, 8 to sleep, 8 to live, 8 to work. And some days I have to work 10 hours because I just do. I love my job. There's something to do. I've got to do 10 hours. And some days I can finish in 6.5, 7. But it's not sustainable to work 10, 12 hours every day. It's just when there's a push needed, I'm happy to do it. But my personal choice is not to work those hours on a continuous basis. So work-life balance is what you make of it from the very first day you walk into an office, and how you choose to mentally deal with that throughout your entire career. Because a lot of people do spend 8 to 12 hours on a screen for work. And that's their choice. And then that just becomes a habit, and it's expected. So for me, that's not where I want to be.
Yeah. So really, you just think it's comparable, really, because it's dependent on the person and how they approach it.
That's my choice. I don't think it's worse or better in either location, because in industry you have different demands. You could be a listed business. You need to work Easter weekends or Christmas weekends because of delivery. It could be a March, December year, and you could be an August year end. You may have to work your summer holidays. So it very much depends on who you work for and what they need and when they need it. So, and if you've done it once, you have an opportunity to front load the work, do it slightly differently, talk to the team. Could this be flexed? But it's about teamwork and what your stakeholders need. And the same in advisory. If you've got a big pitch to deliver, got a big project to deliver, you've got to support multiple projects at the same time, multiple clients to look after. You can see there'll be a pinch once or twice a year, but should you be working like that all the time? Is that expected of you? And these are all self-awareness questions you ask yourself as you move through your career, and you choose the organization you want to work with that matches your ethos. So if you like working 60 hours a week, go work for a firm who likes that, who remunerates for that, who supports that. If you're someone who wishes to work and have a balance in your life, then pick a company that supports that as well. So for me personally, I don't think either one is bad or either one is good. It's you as an individual trying to build collaboration with an organization.
Yeah. And we have touched upon this. We have touched upon this a bit earlier when you mentioned about communication skills in terms of being able to move things away from like a taxi perspective to something that's more like understandable for people who don't work in tax. But are there any other kind of key or really valuable skills that people working in-house need?
Plenty really. I personally think a huge skill that is underrated is managing workload and managing your expectations of what you can deliver plus your stakeholders' expectations of what you can deliver, and usually there can be a massive gap. So if you don't manage your multiple stakeholders on what you're going to deliver, that can create a bit of a problem. So that is something, because if you can imagine a client advisor relationship, the advisor sets it out. This is what I'm doing. This is when I'm doing it by. Client agrees, disagree. We agree a timetable, off you go. But it's not that formal in industry. So you can fall foul and upset people and yourself quite easily by not understanding what it is you've got to deliver. So always be clear. What do you need? When do you need it by? And then look at, can you do it? So don't commit to a date or a time to deliver something if you can't do it. So it's very good to manage expectations and deliver. Deliver when you say, hold your word, deliver when you say you're going to deliver, because that raises your credibility in-house and people will start realizing you're the go-to person. You will come through, you will drop everything for someone, and you move things around for urgent tasks because there will always be something super urgent. So I think managing workloads in an efficient way, whatever your system is. Some people it's an Excel file, some people it's using their calendar, some tasks. There are so many apps for this right now. So whatever works for you, play around with it. Obviously, don't create a beast of an app that you can't manage. So create something that works for you so you're able to deliver a successful role. So I think that's sometimes underrated until you start getting in and getting inundated with stuff. Mm-hmm. You won't notice that actually that's quite a big skill to have.
Yeah, no, it's a good one actually, particularly as well because when you're in industry, they're not going to appreciate, I suppose, how long a tax task takes, like, or doing a piece of research. They're going to have no idea, are they, how long that's going to take. So you really do need to, I suppose, inform them and make them aware of that so that people aren't disappointed. So one of the impressions I've always got about working in-house is that there's a lot more roles for people who are, say, corporation tax or VAT specialists. But now, for example, for someone like me who's an employment tax specialist, there's a lot less roles, particularly outside of London. So I feel like my options, for example, would be much more limited if I wanted to have an in-house role because of my specialism. I mean, is that true, do you think, from your experience? And do you think there's any tax specialisms that are more suited to working into in-house than others?
Some, yes, as you can see, the generalist roles of VAT and corporate tax, perhaps some payroll experience, those roles are easier to hire and people can already see, particularly CFOs, heads of taxes, they can see that it's cheaper to have someone in-house doing those roles rather than paying an advisory. But obviously you have to invest a lot of money into those individuals, systems to bring it in-house if it's been outsourced for ages. But actually any role in any field in an advisory firm can be done in-house. Sometimes you just have to sell it. So I would say continue to network, continue to find out what your clients need. And often your type of roles are pulled in because your client has worked with you anyway. And they'll say, look, you can work for me. It's actually getting a lot bigger than I thought it would be. And people who are niche specialists, you often get pulled in by a client.
Yeah. So is that kind of what your advice would be then, if like there's someone who hasn't got an in-demand specialism for an in-house role? It's to just build relationships with people, particularly who work in-house, to try and get those opportunities as and when they do arise.
Yes, that's one way. Two is just keep learning, keep networking, stay connected with people who are in industry. And if there is an opportunity for you ever to go in or do a short-term assignment, take those opportunities. Perhaps you won't like it. So it's worth just trying to see, or make it aware if you are in an advisory firm, make it clear to your seniors that if a short-term opportunity comes up, like a secondment for a couple of months, because I'm in a niche role, I'd be happy to go to the client to try. And that way you get to feel to see, is industry for you? If it is, you actively have to go look for those roles. They won't drop in your lap.
Yeah. There are actually, I think, some specialist recruiters out there that just deal with in-house tax recruitment, aren't they? So that's probably a good place to start as well. So just a bit more generally then, what advice would you give to someone who does want an in-house tax role and they're, let's say, really struggling to find it?
Oh, I don't think you'd struggle. I think you would find it. It's a lot better to look for jobs right now than it was, say, 20 years ago. So you've got LinkedIn. You can do quite a lot of stuff on there. You can actually set your bar to say, I'm looking for opportunities, if you're able to do that. And then a lot of HR specialists and recruitment team can find you. You follow advisory firms who are constantly putting live adverts out on their websites, on their portals. If you're interested in industry roles, you can sign up for their job vacancy alerts. Like all the big companies in industry have job alerts, and you can sign up for all of them. And that creates an active flow of vacancies coming and popping into your inbox. Recruiters as well, they're very good. And get out, go speak to them all before you look for a job, because it's good to build relationships. Some of them are brilliant at maintaining. I've got probably 2 or 3 recruiters who are just, not the firm, the people who are in that firm, who are just amazing. I would recommend them over anyone every single time, because they are so ethical, and massive amount of etiquette when they're helping you find a job. Hold my confidence every time I have a conversation with them. And it's going out there, building a relationship with recruiters. So if something comes up, they've got their eye on it for you. So you've got another set of eyes looking for an opportunity for yourself when you're ready to move.
Yeah, no, makes sense. And all good thoughts. It sounds like you're a bit of a pro at doing this now, Dipti, from your own experience.
What, looking for a job?
Yeah, in the past and stuff.
No, see, I personally haven't gone overboard looking for a job for probably the last 10 years, because the opportunities have been quite simple. My favorite job interview was with a particular CFO. If he ever listens to this is the one for him. I walked in, and 15 minutes into the interview, he said, "When can you start?" And that's when you sit and you think, and that's how you nail an interview, because he was brilliant. He's one of the CFOs who was very good at tax. And I thought, I'm not going to pass this. And the agent said, he's looking for something quirky. And he doesn't even know what he wants to hire. He's looked at so many tax people. He's just not happy. She said, "I think he's going to like you." I said, "Quirky, I like quirky." So I said, send my CV and I'll sell. And she goes, "Can you sell yourself at the interview?" I said, "Yeah, just send my CV. I'll do it myself." And and he said, "What can you do?" I explained my hours restrictions. I explained I have children. I explained I wouldn't travel as much. And he said yes to everything and said, "When do you start?" So I think it's more about, when you're looking for a job, remember you're not being interviewed, you're also doing the interviewing. Be aware, self-aware of what you're good at, what you bring to the table. No, I'm not saying be arrogant with it, but be really self-aware of what is your skill set that this company is paying for. If a company is prepared to pay 50, 80 grand for your salary annually, what are they getting for it? And make sure you nail that in the interview. Tell them what you're good at. Why are you better than every candidate that is turning up? If you get an interview, you've got to nail it. And you can only do that if you're self-aware of what you're good at. What are your skills? What do you bring to the table? And like I say, 15 minutes is all it takes to sell yourself.
Yeah. I think that CFO that you're talking about there probably really respected the fact that you were willing to almost tell him how it is for you and what you wanted as well, because people who get to senior position,
he was very good. I would work for his phone rings, I'll pick it up. He knows that. So I think, and he's not the only one. I probably have about 6 to 8 of those on my phone right now, so I could just ping them all and say, hey, what are you doing? Do you need any help? So it's building that connection with people where you can support them. Or if you hit the market, if I can speak to 6 CFOs and say, I'm in the market now, where do I go? Hand on my heart, I think one of them would support me. But I'm very happy. I'm not going anywhere. But I'm just saying, you also need to do that. You, as an individual who is listening to this right now, do you have 5 people you can call who can help you get a job within 7 to 10 days? And they don't need to be 5 recruiters. It could just be people in your life who you have supported, networked with, and they will now support and network back with you.
Yeah. That's one thing, actually, I think you've always had quite a strong focus on by the sound of it. Because I think you even wrote an article in Tax Advisor a few years ago about networking.
I did. Jack, thank you for reading that. I think that's probably the first time we got in touch, when you wrote to me after that article. So
yeah.
I did. I was asked to do a session at the CIOT East Midlands conference, which was in Leicester at the National Space Centre. And the chair at the time, Stephen, asked, can you do a breakout session on networking? And I did. And I ran it twice. I had about 15 to 20 people each time. So I thought that was a good breakout session, but there were another 4 sessions running at the same time. So I wasn't expecting mine to have a high footfall. And then one of the ladies came up to me after and said, you should write that up and get it published. And so it was her who asked me to write it up. So it was very kind, mighty grateful for you.
Yeah, it was good. I'll tell you what, I'll stick a link to that in the show notes so people can go and have a read of that, because I thought it was a useful article. It definitely gave me a bit of different perspective, because then I was only like 3 or 4 years maybe into my tax career. So I had a completely different almost perspective on networking. And yeah, I thought they were good tips.
Thank you.
Just to finish off the episode then today, Dipti, have you got any kind of other closing thoughts or advice that you'd like to give to anyone that is considering a move to an in-house role?
I would say do your homework, be comfortable with the organisation you're going to join. And often that is when you're having an interview, ask them if you can speak to staff in the team, and you'll get a feel for what the team are like. Ask very open questions. Are you happy? Do you like work-life balance? What did the company do during COVID? How are you supported? The kind of thing, what means something to you? Find out about those things. Try a secondment into industry. If it doesn't work for you, at least you have relationships back in advisory, a role back in an advisory firm to go back to. I would massively say don't burn your bridges with your managers, senior managers and partners in advisory firms. The world is quite small. You never know when you bump into one of them, and they will need you and you will need them again. I find the tax world very small. I've bumped into the same people time and time again over the last 2 decades. So I would massively say keep your connections clean. If it doesn't work, just naturally exit yourself, but don't be rude about any of the relationships, and hold people's confidence. I think that massively helps building relationships in industry.
The show notes for this episode, where you can find a link to Dipti's LinkedIn profile and to a networking article, can be accessed at thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPP47. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe or sign up for email notifications to make sure you don't miss out on any future episodes. The emails will give you a brief summary of each episode, which are released bi-weekly and on Mondays. The emails will give you a brief summary of each episode, The email notifications will give you a brief summary of each episode. The emails will give you a brief summary of each episode, which are bi-weekly and are released on Mondays. But that's it for this episode. I hope you liked the episode and have taken away some useful points to help you to progress, develop and improve your tax career. Until next time.